And the lion goes, roar, roar, good. And the monkey goes, ooh, ooh, ah, ah, ooh, ooh, ah, ah, very good. Welcome to Three Things Thursday. Today's topic is called prompting. Prompting means when you help a child or an individual achieve a particular result by physically guiding them, verbally guiding them, or visually guiding them. So today we're going to talk about three things regarding prompting. The first thing we're going to talk about is types of prompts. The second thing we're going to talk about is prompt failing. And the third thing we're going to talk about is prompt dependency. So we're going to start with demonstrating the different types of prompting. Over here on this sheet, I have written out all the different types of prompts we use. Prompting is very important when teaching children skills, because if we teach a new skill to a child, we need to physically show them how to do it, allow them to experience the motion, and then slowly fade away our prompt so that they can do it independently. The goal of prompting is to teach children skills so that then they eventually become independent. Prompting can be used with hand washing, toilet training. It can be used with drawing, assembling toys, playing with puzzles, playing with blocks. You will see all of this. And the goal is for the child to first experience how to do it with your help. And as they get into momentum, you will slowly remove your prompt and they will start doing it themselves. So the different types of prompts that we're going to talk about are full physical prompting, partial physical prompting, modeling, gestural prompting, verbal prompting, and visual prompting. We're going to discuss all of them one by one in further detail. Full physical prompting is when you fully physically help the child perform the action. You fully guide them. And partial physical is when you guide the child still, but you use less of a prompt to guide them. So now we're going to demonstrate full physical and partial prompting. The floor is yours. Copy the pattern. Okay, so over here, the child and the therapist were working on block designs. And the child had to copy the block design that the therapist created. So as you can see, initially, the blue block was placed, then red, then pink, then yellow, then green. So initially, for certain blocks, the therapist fully guided the child to put the block. And eventually, at the green block, the therapist partially prompted the child, and then the child performed it. Let's demonstrate partial and full physical with regards to the pegs. Over here you can see that the therapist is fully guiding the child to get the hang of it. And the therapist then moved their hand towards the wrist of the child and allowed the child to experience the motion themselves. So this is now called partial prompting, and the ones before were full physical prompting. Thank you. Okay, the next prompt we're going to discuss is modeling. Modeling was how we began our video today. Modeling is when we demonstrate and then the child has to copy. So there is no physical involvement. So in modeling, the therapist will perform the action and the child will look at the therapist and perform accordingly. So let's do it the monkey.
Press, press. Wow, monkeys! Yay! Let's put some more monkeys inside. Let's.
Press, helpful child.
Thank you. Okay, now let's put the monkeys back inside. Press. 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 Press monkey. Yay! Press. Press. Press monkey. Let's try again. Press. Press. Good. Let's try again. Press. Good. Good
Okay,
job.
so over here there was a couple of things happening, but as you could see, the therapist was demonstrating to the child how to put the monkeys into the barrel, how to press it, and by the end, the therapist pressed and the child watched and pressed. That is called modeling. There is no necessary physical involvement from the therapist. The therapist will demo it, the therapist will say, do this if they're doing toothbrushing, and the child will look and copy. That is modeling. Next we come to gestural. Gestural is when you guide the child by pointing towards how to do it without physical involvement or modeling.
Copy the pattern. Blue. Red. Red. Yellow. Yellow.
So over here, this is called gestural prompting because initially there's a prompt for the child to be shown the color, but then the therapist points to the correct block. The therapist did not hold the child's block on top of the block, the therapist just pointed and the child picked up the block. So that is called gestural prompting. Okay, the next one is verbal prompting. This is when the therapist will say what the child needs to do and the child will listen and respond. And for this is generally important and used for children who actually listen and pay attention. So in order to use verbal prompts, the prerequisite is the child actually is able to follow instruction and listen. Let's go ahead.
Let's start with the freebies. Puzzle. 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 Boat. Boat. Car. Car.
So over here, as you can see, the verbal prompt is whereby the therapist is verbally prompting the child to say the item name, and then the child is responding to the therapist by saying the item name. That is called a verbal prompt. The child has to listen and respond by imitating what the therapist was saying verbally. Okay, the next prompt we're going to talk about is called a visual prompt. A visual prompt is essentially when the child has to visually look at an image or a picture and copy that.
Copy the pattern.
We've been working on this block design with our therapist for a couple of months now, so very happy to see their progress. So over here, as you can see, the child looked at the image and they copied it. That is called a visual prompt. Visual prompt are very important for, let's say, if you use visual schedules. So if you have a child who doesn't like moving from activity A to B to C, you can use visual schedules whereby you will show them pictures of the activity you're going to do, and then what you're going to do next, and then we're going to do next. This is important for children who like to have a routine and a schedule. Visual schedules is one. Another way you can use visual prompts is if you're doing toothbrushing or toilet training, you can have a picture of the child walking into the bathroom, pulling down their pants. They can be cartoon pictures. Pressing the flush, pulling the tissue. These are all images of different actions that the child can perform whilst you're doing toilet training. So these are also ways to use visual prompts. Thank you for the demonstration, guys. Okay, moving forward, we're going to talk about number 2, which is prompt fading. Prompt fading is when you want to, initially you're prompting the child and then you want to reduce your prompt. That's what fading means, to reduce prompt. You can do most to least prompting or least to most. Most to least prompting means initially you give the child as much guidance as you can, and then over time you remove your prompt. And you usually use most to least prompting when you're teaching a new skill. So when a child doesn't know how to do something at all, you use most to least prompting. Least to most prompting is when you use the least amount of prompt and you gradually increase it. You usually use this prompt level when the child has learned the skill but they're erroring. So you go in there with a bit of a prompt to see if they might remember it, and if they're still not getting it, you increase your prompt levels. So let's demonstrate most to least prompting with the bee and leaf tree. Putting the leaves in.
Let's play with the beehive. Yay! Come. Let's put the leaf inside. Put the leaf.
Now this is a new activity for this child. So the therapist is using full physical guidance to prompt the child. So the therapist will do 2 or 3 leaves full physically, and then after 2-3 leaves the therapist will gradually reduce the prompt to partial to see if the child is picking up the skill. That would be partial, when the therapist moves the hand from the fingers to maybe the wrist, to the elbow, to the upper arm, and then you eventually fade it away.
Leaf.
The therapist then moved the hand even further away.
Leaf.
Imitate. Sometimes therapists also struggle, and that's okay too. Because eventually it's about explaining to the child the movement at which you're going through the...
Good. Oh, let's play with the leaf. Bee. Bee.
So over here, bee.
Bee. Bee. Good job.
Bee.
Bee. Bee. Bee.
Bee.
Good job.
So over here we've done a demonstration of most to least prompting in 2 different ways. One is physical guidance, whereby the therapist physically guided the child to put the leaf in and put the leaves in and faded the prompt. Another way to fade your prompt is vocally. So verbally. So for example, you will tell the child B, and they'll say B when you give it. So that's called a verbal prompt. Then you'll say B, and they'll say B. Then you're going to hold the B back, and you're not going to say the item and see if the child themselves say B. That is when the child learns to request for the item under the presence of the item and not the verbal prompt by the therapist. So that is also a fading of prompt levels. And least to most is essentially the opposite, whereby if the child is finding it difficult to perform already a mastered skill, the therapist will first prompt them a little bit and then increase their prompt levels. We're going to move on to the last one, which is prompt dependency, which is something very important. What happens in prompt dependency is when children get used to being prompted or guided as to do something, they wait for you to prompt them. So for example, if the therapist is teaching the child to clap, the child will hold out their hand until the therapist is going to prompt the child. So let's show some prompt dependency.
Do this. Do this. Do this. Do this. Do this.
You can also see over here the therapist went from fully guiding the child, and then eventually the therapist slowly faded her hand back to see if the child would clap their hands themselves. So what happened here was the therapist said do this, and the child put their hand forward waiting to be prompted. Let's demonstrate prompt dependency in terms of puzzle. Signing for puzzle. So you hold your hand down but you're not.
Let's play the puzzle. There you go, Phoebe. There you go. Puzzle. 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 Puzzle.
So over here you can see the child is waiting to be prompted by the therapist, and then once the therapist prompts the child does it. It's okay if a child is prompt dependent, but what you want to do is initially you prompt the child and then you slowly remove your hand until they start to do it themselves. So for today we discussed prompting, and we discussed the types of prompting, the prompt failing procedures, and prompt dependency. I will be writing this below the video for those who cannot see this clearly. Thank you for tuning in today for 3 Things Thursday. Thank you to our amazing demonstrators, and we hope to see you next week. Khuda Hafiz. Bye bye.